Hello and welcome to Mindset Matters, a podcast that deals with all things mindset. I'm your host, Colin Perry, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Amie. Amie, are you ready?
I'm ready, Colin.
So, the reason that I've invited Amie on today is because we've shared some experience over the last few months, Amie, haven't we? We're part of a group together that sort of go on hikes, talk about mental health. We do some cold water dips, all kinds of different things just to try and help to ease the burden of everyday life more than anything, I'd say. That sound about right to you?
Definitely summed it up lovely there.
And then, so as a result of that, we've got into some conversations, Amie, and I think your life has been remarkable. Ups and downs, without a shadow of doubt. And I think that you are testament right now to everything that I want to talk about on these shows of, states of mind that people can get into, various pitfalls that can happen along the way, but then also as well how you can come out of that at the other side. So I think without further ado, let's go right the way back, start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about who's Amie. How did you grow up? A little bit maybe of your childhood that you think might be relevant to the story.
Okay, thanks, Col. And thank you for having me here and having me do this. It's an absolute honour. Right, so we're gonna go right back. Okay, so some of my story is based around what I remember as a child, which is very, very small but vivid details. A lot of my early childhood stories based around what I now know as an adult, through having access to my social services childhood records when I was 16. So a lot of what I tell is based on what I know or I've learnt. Um, so I was born in 1978, 46 years young. Um,
Nothing wrong with
and
that, Amie.
what makes sense now and what I know through having a look at those boxes and boxes and boxes of care records is that I was the third born child. So my older sister is 4 years older than me. My mum then had a little boy. Um, and from what I know through research is that he died at 6 months old. There was a cot death, and what it states in those records that now makes sense as to some of the reasons why I wasn't treated as a child should be treated is that I was conceived really quickly, and I was conceived as a replacement child. And it was stated in those records that she'd said to social services, I was devastated when I found out that Amie was a girl and not a replacement boy. And when she was born, this girl, I felt no connection and wasn't able to bond with my child because I wanted to replace the dead son.
Had
That
those words.
she'd said those words, yeah, yeah. So that makes sense because what I will reveal about my early childhood is pretty traumatic. Um, from what I now know through my own experience of lifelong struggles, is substance abuse can be massive and huge and a way of coping and dealing with huge issues. So I remember this violent alcoholic as a mum. As I say, I've got a little bit more understanding now with regards to that. But I wasn't wanted, so there was no connection, there was no bond, and I think I was a lively kid. So she was really, really, really abusive, physically abusive and mentally abusive. And I don't have any happy early childhood memories. I just have the really, really vivid ones.
I think, Amie, is that, sorry to interrupt, do you look back now and think that's because there weren't any happy moments, or just that the unhappy moments were so significant, so scarring that they've overshadowed the other things?
Probably, probably. what I can do is describe the worst case scenario of the violence as a child. I think I might have been around 6 years old, and I was chased to the top of the back of the bunk bed. And what's actually quite bizarre is having conversations with my older sister over the years. She recalls this more than I do because she was a witness, I was the victim. So what she saw is actually quite harrowing, because it's worse than what I physically felt, although what I physically felt must have been horrendous at the time. So I was chased to the top of the back of the bunk bed, and in a screaming fit, I was dragged to the floor by both my legs, and as a result, my legs were pulled out of the sockets. And that was one incident that I can recall really clearly. So the
Literally
level of
pulled out the
violence,
sockets.
pulled completely out the sockets, yeah. I was hospitalised, and I remember being on these sandbag tractions. So it was some kind of like wire that held my legs up that were on sand back in we would have been in the early 80s. So I mean, that's the level of violence. I remember numerous sort of punches to the face, and I remember social services being involved. I remember this person, and now knowing that this was a social worker, I think I was around 4, and I'd been punched that heavily to my face. I had a huge half a side bruise, and I think the neighbours had reported the violence at that point. So yeah, the childhood wasn't great in that respect. My biological father left the family home when I was around 3. What I can either recall or I've read. Sometimes that's a bit blurred. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I know and what I've read, but I know the traumatic incidences as vivid as today. He moved back home to his parents, so I would go and sleep at dad's, and dad was sexually abusive. So I would be physically and mentally abused at home by mum, and then go off to dad's at weekend to be sexually abused. And I now know through conversations with my older sister that the sexual abuse that took place where she was the victim was harrowing. So my dad, my biological father, not her biological father, was horrendously abusing her in the family home. And then when he left and went to live with his parents, I would go on the weekend, and the same traumatic experiences. Not to the absolute extreme, but that's irrelevant. It was sexual abuse would happen to me.
I know you don't mean to be blasé about it, but I feel like almost that's maybe how you've learned to deal with this, that you've probably just spoken about two of the most horrific things that you could probably imagine a child going through there. You had a really extreme physical abuse to the point where your legs were pulled out your sockets, Amy. I mean, that's catastrophic injuries. To then go into, you almost, you probably would have thought, I'm going to get some relief from this now to go and see my dad, only to stumble into something perhaps even worse. And that must have been so hard for you. Did you know when it was coming round to a visit with your dad, and with that anxiety sort of build? Do you remember anything of the way you felt back then?
I really, like you say, this sort of blasé attitude. It's literally become a matter of fact sort of attitude, because I can't recall feelings or emotions, and I don't have a way of expressing how I would have felt at that time, or did I know when I was going to dad's, or did it that just doesn't. It's really hard to explain. It just doesn't. I'm not able to acknowledge that in my brain. It's just part of the story, if you
I
know what I
understand
mean.
that, and it's
Yeah.
some of it will be that you were obviously young, but I imagine some of it as well as a self-defense mechanism of
Mm.
trying to suppress it a little bit almost, because that would be very traumatic to relive every day, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if somebody else was telling me the story, I'd be like, wow, oh my God, but me telling my story doesn't, this parts of my story has progressed that will touch touched the emotions massively. But this part of my story is just like telling you what a day I had in the park last week. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? It might sound bizarre, but it really is. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's fascinating, and it's but it's also very hard, isn't it, for anyone else to understand. That's how you've had to deal with it. How long did this period go on for? Do you think, where you were going from this sort of physical abuse to sexual abuse over the weekend? Was this at a
The
very
way
early
I,
childhood?
yeah, the way I recall it, the way my brain works is that or I've read that my dad left when I was around 3. I remember social services getting involved when I was about 4. I can remember the social worker. I can picture his face now. Um, I can remember certain instances of physical abuse. I can recall them in my brain as clear as day. Um, and then my next jump is moving away from that first family home, to then obviously leaving my dad and never seeing him. I may have seen him a couple of times. Well, I did actually see him, but in really negative circumstances that I chose to make negative as a teenager and an adult. But yeah, so my chronology again is, I don't know how many times, I don't know how often, I don't know how frequent, but I sort of just remember that around 4, leaving the first family home around 7. So over that period
Okay.
of time.
So then, when you were 7, when you say leaving the family home, you talked about social services being involved. So
No, not at that
is this
point. Yeah,
no?
my mum used to sing in a band, and she was married to my sister's dad, and then she was married to my dad, and I don't recall any other the relationships in those early years. But then she met a fella who was a trombone player in a band, and my mum was actually a singer. And we ended up moving to so we ended up moving from Cheshire East over to Manchester when I was around 7, to live with this trombone player. And I absolutely adored this fella because I am very creative and very musically minded, and always have been. It's been a natural sort of pull factor for me. And I adored this fella, and we went off to live with him. But what I can see now is that her alcoholism was off the scale at this point, and we moved in with him. And at that point, then I had a younger brother. So her dream son was it came along. So there was me and there was my younger brother. My eldest sister, who was 4 years older than me. So I was around 7. So she was just about to start high school. So that makes sense. So she was about 11. And he would have been 3 years younger than me. So he would have been 4. So we moved over to central Manchester. And my eldest sister stayed in Cheshire East with my maternal grandparents because she'd just started high school. So off we went to this new place, and mum was a off the scale alcoholic at that point. And I remember, again, lots of small instances. I remember, having to find her in pubs. I remember having to feed my younger brother because we couldn't find her. I remember having to scavenge 50p's for the electric meter. I remember just the little things, and I remember some really violent incidences. I remember um, being asked to make a pot noodle. My mum, this was a huge 3-story old Victorian townhouse in the centre of Manchester, one of the old Victorian areas.
Yeah, I know. You
And
lived here with the guy who
with the
played the
guy,
trombone,
yeah,
the band.
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah. And the very, very top level was 2 bedrooms, and he had one, and mum had this little like boudoir kind of room it was. And I was shouted up to this room, so being about 7, and to make a pot noodle. So when these little things, I look back and I think, 7 years old making a pot noodle shouldn't really have happened in the first place. But so I've gone and made this pot noodle, and I'd put too much water in this pot noodle. So when I returned this to this drunken lady, it was thrown at me. And as it was thrown at me, the dog that we had at the time got completely irate and started attacking me. So she removed herself and my brother from the room and left me in this room with the dog, and shouted, "Kill, kill, Duke, kill, kill." So I was left in this room with the dog to be attacked and was hospitalised after that. So that's another biggie that I can remember. So just putting some kind of context, the
Amie, that's
extreme of the
horrific.
abuse, yeah. And I can remember my little brother shouting, "Kill, kill, kill,
He was shouting as
kill,"
well.
to the dog, yeah. So I was taken to
He'd
the
obviously just
MRI.
been indoctrinated, hasn't he? He's just following his mum,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
assume, at that point.
I remember being taken to the MRI at that point, and I remember, see, my memory's bizarre. I have all these little sort of intricate details. I remember trying to run away from Manchester Children's Hospital, and I can picture and see them now, the outdoor metal like what you see of films, like when someone's running away outside and it's those outdoor metal stairs and running down there.
Staircases,
And I
yeah.
know now, because I know the area, that I was found in Longsight. I didn't know it was Longsight then, but I was found in Longsight as a 7-year-old running away from hospital. And I was another thing I recall is being photographed and refusing to stand there in my knickers and vest. And when I look back, I think if that wasn't a sure sign of someone that had been seriously abused, but still not removed at this point, still not removed,
Being photographed
um,
by who, sorry, Amy?
by the
Who
hospital,
was photographing?
it would have been
Right, okay.
it would have been some kind of social service evidence or something like that, wouldn't it? At that
Right,
point,
cataloguing the
yeah, yeah,
injuries.
yes, yeah, yeah. But
Okay.
I remember all these little things, and that's physical abuse. I can recall a serious mental abuse incident where, from what I know now, from what my sisters told me, is that her relationship with this trombone player was actually quite abusive. I don't recall seeing any of that, but I do remember him being in the bath one day, and he'd always have his little old-fashioned, kind of old-fashioned, but we would have been in the 80s radio in like the hallway, and I remember my mum telling me to throw it in the bath. And so I look back at that and think, wow, that is some serious emotional and mental abuse going on there, isn't it? Along with the being, stuck in rooms and attacked by dogs, and
Different level,
yeah.
isn't it?
So
Do you do you do you think that, because I'm trying to sort of understand what the chronology, if you like, as you said before, of how even this came about for your mum. Do you think that this was the drink problem that led to her being, I mean, it sounds mentally unstable, or do you think there were mental health issues that led to her drinking, that led to this sort of behaviour, or is it not even something that you've reflected on or could
I've
speak on?
tried to reflect on it, particularly because of some of the issues I've had as an adult, and I believe that alcoholism runs in the family. When I look back now, I can see patterns of behaviour with grandparents as well. I believe there might have been some mental health issues, but I think the extreme violence, was due to extreme alcoholism and not being able to control your emotions. And I'm able to do that now as an adult that's had to deal with some of that stuff myself. But yeah, I remember staying with the trombone player for a while, not very long, and then she met somebody else, and then we did a little tour around Manchester in lots of bed and breakfast kind of establishments they were at the time. I think now, looking back, they were like council run B&Bs, like what we have now. Do you know what I mean? But um,
Right, okay.
he, this next fella, was really mentally abusive. He didn't like me. I can remember that. I don't remember any physical or sexual contact, but I can remember the emotional abuse. I can remember that I wasn't liked, my behaviours weren't liked, and him and my mum were massive drinkers, codependent drinkers. And if she wasn't in the pub, we'd be in all these little B&B kind of things. And I can remember coming home from school and having to go straight to bed. I can remember having to wee in a bottle at the side of the bed because I wasn't allowed to get up out of bed. So my little head at this point was obviously absolutely traumatized, and I can't quite connect the dots as to why I made the decision to run away at around 7 or 8. But clearly my little head took me off. So we spent this bit of time in this Manchester area, and we spent time with the trombone player, then with this other fella who I don't have many recollections on, other than the fact that he absolutely despised me. And just leading up to me leaving my biological mum, I can remember the day clear. So I'd taken my younger brother, which in itself is ridiculous, to the park because there was the fair was on, and I've been
So
told
he
to
would have
come
been
back.
what, 4 at the time, Amy? Is
He
that
would have
about
been
right?
about
Or
4 before,
yeah,
and I was about 7. Yeah, or possibly 5 and 8, possibly. Yeah.
off you go to
So
the park.
off we go to the fair in a big central Manchester area, and told to be back at a certain time. I can remember asking this fellow what time it was, and I can know now that he'd given me the wrong time. So I'm walking back, thinking we're all right, and next minute I can see Mum, the new fella, and my sister, because my sister had come for a visit from grandparents, coming towards me. And I got absolutely leathered, absolutely battered in the street because I wasn't on time. And I
In the
ran.
streets, what is this, outside your home, or is this
This is
where
on the
was
main
this happening?
road. This is on a main road from the fair to the B&B that we were staying in at the time.
So did
So
other people not see this happening? You don't
not the
know,
intricate details I don't recall, but I
no,
know I
no.
ran. Yeah, so
Okay,
I ran to the home of the trombone player, which was the first place we went to, because I still idolised this man, and it seemed like my safe place. Although I'd been, encouraged to try and kill him, and had been absolutely abused in the house that we lived in, I still saw this fella as my safety net.
I'm
Yeah,
laughing because it's that sort of dark humour, isn't it? You think
yeah,
like,
yeah,
it seems so ridiculous, doesn't it? But I totally understand that for you, that was relatively safe
yeah,
compared to some of the
yeah.
other things that you've been through and what you were going through now.
I've got a really funny story here. I really have. So I ran to his, and I saw him come in from work, and he'd left the back door open. So I snuck in, and then I heard him go back out. Now, this fella, he used to wear a beret, and he had a big white beard, and he had this top room in this massive townhouse. And I'd gone and hid and snuck into this top room. Bearing in mind, I'm only like, what, 7, 8 we're talking here. And I knew somehow, I don't know how I knew this, that my mum had a key to that house. And how I knew this, I never know to this day. I put the catch on the door from the inside so she couldn't use a key. I don't know how I knew that would work, but I did. It's bizarre, some of the stuff I recall. And I went up to this top room and I hid. And then I looked out the window and I saw that a neighbour saw me. So I got one of his berets and I put one of his berets on and I stuck cotton wool around my face. And I got back in the window and pretended I was in, so that she'd been mistaken. She was actually him all along. She'd see. But then next minute, the police were at the door. So I rang the police and I said, um, I'm really bad. I'm a really bad child. My mum has always told me if I don't be good, I'm going to go to a place called a children's home. And please come and get me because that's exactly where I want to go. And that was it. Well, almost. The police turned up.
That's
I
where
remember.
the social services got involved,
Well, they got involved when I was 4, so I must have
right?
been. And also bearing in mind, there'd been this massive incident where I'd been taken to hospital through the dog bites and had been
Yeah,
photographed.
of course. Yeah, so they must have
So
been involved all through that. Yeah.
what a huge failure already. It took me at 8 to ring them and say, I've been told that I need to go to a children's home, and that's exactly where I want to go. Can you take me, please?
I mean, you're
Um,
absolutely right, aren't you? That is shocking, really, to think about it. You'd hope that couldn't happen now, but then I guess we still see cases occasionally where these things happen. But you've gone to hospital with severe dog bites. You know,
She told social services that I'd fell down because I've still got the scar on my thigh of the biggest bite. It was a huge bite into my thigh, and she said that I'd fell down the stairs and there was a rusty old nail with a old broken hand railing, and I'd fell and sliced myself down the stairs.
then
So yeah,
there was
bizarre.
also the previous incident where you've gone to hospital with your legs pulled out your sockets. You'd think, how could that be explained? There's a catalogue here building up that surely
It's
someone
shocking,
somewhere should have
shocking,
picked
isn't
this
it?
up.
Yeah.
It's
But
a real failure.
it took me to put myself in care. Um, Two police officers turned up that day, and I can remember one of them going, Get home with your mum. This is ridiculous." And I can remember one going, "No, no, we're taking this child." So that actually makes me a bit tearful. You see, I'm connecting emotions now to how somebody else would have felt. And that's my bizarre way of dealing with things, because that actually makes me a little bit tearful to think there's one officer there that had compassion. And if it wasn't for that officer, I'd probably be dead as a child. So this one officer said, "No, no, she's coming with us." And off I went to my very first children's home. So me,
Thank God for him.
thank
Although
God for that. Yeah, I'm
that's
still
not,
alive,
unfortunately,
self-disabled.
yeah, the story doesn't just instantly get positive from there, does it? As we'll find out in a second. But at
So
least that was hopefully the beginning to a slightly better
you would have
day to day
hoped.
life. You'd have
Yeah,
hoped, wouldn't you? Yeah, but
yeah, yeah.
and again, it just shows the odds, doesn't it? The roll of the dice. That one police officer's thinking there's nothing here to look at.
Mm,
The other person's understood the real situation. If just that one police officer
yeah,
turned up that day, you're
yeah.
still at home.
And then come to reveal that my brother and my sister then actually left my grandparents and went to live with my mum, this new partner in Manchester, not the trombone player, the next partner, and my brother. And my sister's actually revealed to me that he physically abused her. So I can't recall him ever physically abusing me, but she's recalled an incident to me of him trying to strangle her in a taxi. So anything could have happened from that point onwards with me. So yeah, fate was
Yeah,
it.
and this is it.
I put myself in what I thought was the safest place that day, yet to be revealed.
I mean, that again just shows you, because you don't know, do you, fully, whether you just don't remember some of the physical abuse from him,
Mm.
or whether it didn't happen and this is an escalation of his behaviour. That by the time he got to your sister, that's how he now was. I assume, and maybe wrongly so, was he a drinker as well?
Yeah, and I don't know how I know this. Again, I have these little bits of information that I think, how on earth do I know that? Like, for example, when we left the very first house that I was born into in Cheshire East, I know that my mum sold that house for £21,000. I have no idea how I know that, but I know it. So all these little intricate details that for some reason I know. I must have been so intuitive as a child, how I knew to put a catch on a door to stop a key from working from the outside. So I know somehow. Maybe I've read it. Maybe I've researched it with my notes. Maybe I heard it. This second man in Manchester that we went to live around Airbnbs, not Airbnbs, bed and breakfast with. I've read or found out somewhere that he was a psychiatric patient on the loose, a psychiatric patient. That sounds awful. I don't mean like that, but he was actually an
Yeah, I know what you
inpatient
mean.
of a big hospital in Manchester, and
He should have been hospitalised at the time.
he was AWOL,
Yeah.
always AWOL from a psychiatric unit, a big psychiatric unit in Manchester. Yeah,
Do you know, just going back to what you just touched upon then, as you know, we're foster carers. And so we speak to children in care a lot. And I'm always taken aback by their, well, survival skills, isn't it? Because the attention to detail quite often, and we meet a lot of children that can tell you the exact route in the car from one location to another, that I think I would struggle without sat nav for
yeah,
that.
yeah. My
But
my
you
bearings are
become
second to
tuned in,
none.
don't you?
Yeah,
You become
yeah,
tuned into, these are the type of things I might need to recall because my survival might depend upon it. And so, like the latch on the door, that was pure survival,
yeah,
wasn't it? Is that was
yeah.
the way to keep you safe.
Without even
So you
knowing that's
remember
something
those
I could
things.
do. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
bizarre, isn't it? Yeah, definitely survival
you become
mode.
tuned in.
Yeah, ingrained.
So social services now are finally involved properly. They've been involved since you were 4, but I'm just going to say it doesn't seem like they were doing too much. But then when you
Clearly.
finally put yourself into care,
Yeah.
basically, what happens from there? Because I know And again, we joked about it almost, but when you think about it, it's another really sad point of this, is that you said to me earlier on, you'd lived in as many places as you were years old. At one point, you
One
realised, like,
point
did you
in my
say,
early 40s, I'd counted, yeah, as many places.
so 40 odd places that you've lived in. So this is you've described two or three already. So it sounds like this is the beginning of a real roller coaster with you
Yeah.
never getting settled anywhere.
If you had about 3 days to recall the amount of children's homes and foster homes that I lived in, we could sit here and do this, but I'm just going to have to summarise this as I lived in many different children's homes and foster homes. Short term for a very long time. Some nice people, some people that clearly were in it for the money, some people that cared, some people that couldn't manage my behaviours, all sorts of different things. But I went off to live in Wales, and I believe it was still a short-term placement. It was pretty abusive in its own way. It was a huge old vicarage that had been turned into a guest house, and there was about 5 of us foster children there, and we were basically slaves. We were basically made to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, set tables for the guest house, feed the cats, clean the guest house. It was huge. And it was an absolute horrendous experience. And whilst I was there, I was a prime child for looking for long-term placement. And I was advertised, Cole, and I love this story, bizarrely, because I think it's absolutely bonkers. And it just would be unreal to believe that this happened. I was advertised in if anybody ever sees this from an old school social care background, you'd probably remember that I was advertised in Parents Please. So there was a magazine, there was a
I've
catalogue
heard about
for
this. Yeah,
children. I told
was this where?
somebody that
Yeah, I think you told Lorna about this.
I
Yeah,
told
I've heard
Laura
about
about
this.
it, yeah. So I
Wow.
was advertising Parents Please, my little photograph. I'd chopped all my hair off in a dramatic case of drama queen behaviour. I didn't want any hair, so I'd cut it all, and I had these little beads on and this little knitted jumper, and there was a little blurb about me and what I needed and what I was about, and I was advertised, put out there for long-term placement. So I went from, so this is after all these numerous short-term placements in children's homes, foster placements all over Manchester, ended up in Wales. And then I was picked out the Parents Please magazine for potential of long-term foster care. So that would have been till I was 18. So I was about 10. And off I went to live in somewhere not far from here, actually. And I was fostered into what looked like this dream family. And this was going to be my forever home, as far as I felt or could have felt at the time. Sadly, unbeknown to me, that foster carer had an ulterior motive, and it seemed that my little picture of me as a little girl with little beads and a little was just an opportunity to groom someone into the family for sexual abuse. So it turned out that this place where I was meant to be safe and ready to live out the rest of my childhood was actually going to be another traumatic experience for me. So not long after going to live there, foster mum was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Foster dad was a very subtle sexual abuser, to the point where I wasn't even sure if it was sexual abuse at times. I think I just thought as a teenager, it was, or a young teenager, talking 10 to like 12 and a half. It was a way of him showing love and affection, and I was actually receiving it as love and affection, but it was really, really wrong. And before you knew it, my behaviours took me away from there in 2.5 years, almost 3 years. I'd gone back to Manchester.
So do you think she wasn't aware of this? Foster mum that
I
you
don't
talked
think she
about.
was aware
Do
of
you
it
think
at
she?
all. Absolutely not.
No, he was very calculated and subtle with it, and
It was
and hid
very
it.
subtle. Yeah, and it was very hidden. but it was very, very wrong. To the point where I questioned it for years and years and years afterwards. And
Yeah, because you
it
didn't
wasn't
know.
until it wasn't I had final confirmation in my head when I actually moved back to this area, and I met another member of the family who was a young girl when I was a young girl, and she was able to confirm through her personal experience that everything I had in my head was was real. It wasn't just in my head. I knew it was always wrong. It was so subtle. I mean, it was as subtle as being sat on his knee at night time when foster mum had gone to bed, and watching movies and cuddling and caressing as far as the highest part of my thigh, and being able to feel what I shouldn't have been able to feel. I shouldn't have been sat on a male foster carer's knee at 10, 11 and 12. And
Absolutely not.
I shouldn't have been caressed at the very tops of my thigh in a silky nightie. And I shouldn't have been able to feel what he was feeling from behind me. So it was as subtle as that, but it was so, so wrong. And if anything else, it was wronger than anything else that happened to me, because I was meant to be in a safe place at that point, and I was meant to be in my longest placement of care.
And
And
wrong because you just, as you just said, you're craving the right kind of affection
mm,
and love. And so, as you said, it has you questioning, is this what that is? Is, should I feel grateful to have received this? And
I,
it's all of, it's the psychological effect, isn't it, of that, of you
I
not knowing
wanted
fully.
to sit on
Yeah.
his knee at night time when my foster mum went to bed. I was craving that attention, but knowing it was somehow wrong, but not being able to confirm to myself how wrong that was until I'd left.
One of those examples where an organization thinks this will be a great idea. The, what was it called? Sorry, Parents Please. Did you say
Please magazine.
Parents
Yeah.
Please magazine? And that's someone's brainchild, isn't it? Someone sat there thinking, "Great, we'll be able to get these kids out there to families who might be able to look after them, and it'll be a brilliant thing to do." And that's a catalogue for paedophiles,
Yeah. And do you know
isn't
what,
it?
Colin? I've still got the brochure. I've still got the blurb, and it says Amie needs a strong father figure. And that's one of the points it makes in that blurb. Yeah. It's
It's
bizarre,
as I
isn't it?
said, I'm
Scary.
sure the intentions were right, I'm sure, but you wonder, don't you, how can these things go unchecked? How is there no voice of reason in there to say that's not going to have a good outcome? And also, I know now, and I'm not saying that this can't still happen today because I'm sure it does, but the assessment that you go through as a foster parent now is up to 3 months long. I remember a social worker coming to our house doing random checks, checking our fridge. I was asked about my sex life with my wife,
Mm.
really intimate details that you think, I can see what they're doing here. This is thorough. And although it's really uncomfortable and intrusive at times, it's necessary. And you'd hope that with those checks that can't happen. But as I
They were
said,
already fostering, but they had two teenage lads there, and I was the first. I think I was the first girl. So yeah, it's scary stuff, in it really is. But
oh,
again, although we're talking about really serious emotional attachment, emotional things here, I still have this matter of fact sort of approach to everything, because that's how I've learned to cope.
yeah, that's your tough skin, isn't it? And as you say, wow, we could probably do 5 episodes on your childhood, I think. You know, to come through what you've come through, and we're going to get to the in between stages now. But I just want to take this opportunity now to say how, with hopefully not come across as patronising here, but how incredibly proud I am of you that you've been through the worst experiences, Amie, and you're the person that you are today. That I talk to, and the other people in the group that we have created look up to, and I see how much they get from one comment from you, because it comes from a place of knowing this is not you haven't read 5 textbooks on something. You've lived all of these experiences and more, which we'll go on to, and
Thank you.
come out of it the other end. And it's something to be really, really proud of, I think. And like I said, we could talk about it for 5 hours, but if we sort of go forward a little bit now,
Yeah.
what were some of the issues that you then faced, you think, as an adolescent, early
Mm.
adulthood, that probably as a result of everything we've just
Yeah.
spoken about?
Yeah. So yeah, I can sort of recall now my behaviours. I can recall. I can. It makes sense why I became. I then kicked up a bit of a stink about wanting to leave that home. And I was in touch with my maternal grandparents and my only uncle at that point, and I was visiting them occasionally back in Cheshire East. And I remember going for Christmas, and there was some kind of talk about. At this point, my older sister was living back with my grandparents. Um, my younger brother, I missed something out very slightly, but I did touch on it before. When I went to the Welsh foster home for a very, very small period of time, my brother and sister joined me. So something had
Okay.
happened. Something had happened with the incident I talked about before, with the strangulation of my sister, and they were removed for a very short period of time. My sister then went to live with my grandparents. My brother went back to my mum, so I don't know what happened. But again, you've got that whole, I was the only one that wasn't wanted anywhere, wasn't I? So I was having contact with my grandparents and my uncle and his wife and my only cousin, and I'd spent Christmas with them. And there'd been some talk about my uncle and his wife having me go to live with them. So I came back to the foster placement where I was being abused by the foster dad with this whole new attitude that I wanted to go back to Cheshire East, South Manchester ways. It became apparent that it was just talk that they wanted me, and I was manipulating the truth of conversation, let's say at the time. Although I'd heard it very clearly that they were going to take me in, but so I'd got myself all worked up, and I was replaced back in Cheshire East, the very very border of South Manchester and Cheshire East, and I was replaced there. And from there, I just became a bit feral, really. I'd gone from being quite a geeky little girl who was very, very clever and very wise and very in tune, but not very like part of the crew at school. Very bullied, very, very bullied whilst I was over this way. I actually went to a local school to here, and I was very, very bullied in school. I couldn't fit in, and I went back to South Manchester with this whole new I'm not going to be bullied kind of attitude, and soon became a little bit feral. So again, loads more foster parents, loads of crisis centres, loads of children's homes. I got introduced to the street life around sort of 14, and ended up hanging around sort of Piccadilly Gardens in Manchester, 1990s Piccadilly Gardens kid. Complete chaos, absolute madness. All the kids in care absconded, and kids in secure units going AWOL. It was just chaos, but it was mad chaos.
Was
And
that the crowd, was it, that you were surrounded by? Was it a lot
yeah,
of other kids who were in similar situations or had been, do you think? Yeah.
yeah, it was on and off this for me, this lifestyle for a few years, because sometimes I was placed and maybe a little tiny bit settled for a while. Always trying to go to school, always trying my best no matter what to go to school. And funnily enough, we'll get to this, but I ended up sitting my GCSEs, though my life was absolutely chaotic from leaving um, this Cheshire East sort of area back over to the other side of Cheshire East and South Manchester. I was actually in one school the whole time, so I was living all over Manchester and still travelling to this one school that I
Really?
went back to. Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's
and
rare
still
as well, yeah.
trying my best.
Just
Yeah,
traveling the whole time to
literally. I mean, at one point I
yeah.
was living in Middleton, which is the northest part of Manchester, and travelling all the way to Gatley, which is where I went to school, which is on the border of sort of Cheshire and South Manchester. So Gatley, Shields, Stockport kind of way. So I went to the same school the whole time. Didn't always go every day. Didn't always do my best every day, but I still tried. I was all over the place, different foster homes. I was turning up at teachers' houses with suitcases going, I've run away, can you take me in, please? And it was honestly madness. And at some point over that time, I was introduced to street life. And it was chaos. It was absolute chaos. I mean, we're talking 11-year-olds digging heroin in the hands. We're talking 12-year-old street prostitutes. We're talking 11, 12, 13-year-old absconding from secure units living in tents in Chinatown. Do you know what I mean? It was just madness. And
A
although it was a
dangerous
bit
scene
on and
to be
off,
involved in.
pardon?
Sorry, I said a dangerous scene to be involved in.
Didn't
Surely,
seem
did you
dangerous at the
feel that though?
time.
No, no,
It wasn't
no.
dangerous at the time at all. No, it was absolute madness, but it wasn't dangerous. Maybe looking back now, I put myself in some very really vulnerable situations.
Fun then.
Trying my best.
Sorry, Amy, to interrupt again. Would you say it was fun? Did you enjoy
Yeah,
that element of it? Was there a
it's
bit of freedom
chaos.
to this? Yeah, yeah.
Loved it. Absolutely loved the chaos. Loved the life. Loved trying to settle in foster parents, trying to sort my head out, still going to school. Lived quite a bit of a double life. It was pretty mad because at some point from sort of being about 14 till getting pregnant with my eldest child. So that period of time was just madness. And at the early start of that period of time, I was introduced to hard drugs. I was introduced to child street prostitution. Um, I was introduced to all sorts of chaotic behaviours, but I lived this really double life. So I'd still try and go to school. And by the time I was almost 16, I was in a hostel in Longside and still went and sat my GCSEs, but then would come home from school, go to Wally Range, work the prostitute beat, make £20 and go and score a crack. It was just bizarre. It was absolutely bonkers, and up until getting pregnant with my first daughter, I was living this really bizarre double life. I was sort of like really clever, really in tune, really future focused, wanted this career, but it's just still also mixing with absolute chaotic childhood influences. And
That you, like I said, you described this scene that is almost unimaginable, isn't it, for most people? That to manage to conform within certain hours of the day
mm,
and do what you needed to do, despite that chaos going on, but being pulled back to it as soon as you had chance. How old were you then when you just mentioned hard drugs and
yeah,
prostitution? What
uh,
was what age were
about
you when you
14,
first?
15 when I was first introduced to crack cocaine and child prostitution. Yeah. And it wasn't, well, yeah, it definitely was child sexual exploitation, but I wasn't exploited by anyone. I wasn't made to do anything. It was just bizarrely and quite naturally the life that I was living. So I was in a hostel when I did my GCSEs. And then I went, so I got my GCSEs. I did really well, I got an A in drama as a surprise. I got a B in English language, a C in English literature, and I got 4 Ds in maths,
I
science,
mean,
geography, and
you
art.
consider what is going on in your life before and during that. That's incredible
I
to come out
know.
with
And when I
results
look
like
back,
that.
I actually think that's pretty amazing. I flunked it completely. The English, I don't even know how I did it. The literature, I'd never read the book. I got
Yeah,
to
but
the
there's
exam
clearly
and I said
a
to,
natural intelligence there, isn't there?
yeah,
And
yeah,
you
yeah.
mentioned there that you're the one probably constant in your life was school. That was maybe your safe haven that you always tried to make sure you could go.
I
But did you
absolutely
enjoy it?
hated it. Well, no, I
Yeah, I was just
hated
gonna say.
every minute of
Yeah,
school. Hated every single minute of school. I was either bullied or the bully, but bullied or the bullied. I was either the bullied or the bully. In when I was over these sides, I was really badly bullied. Really, really badly bullied. In the little village that I lived in, not far from here, I was bullied severely. When I moved, I tried to get a bit harder, and I either became bullied or a bully. Because I had that needed to have that defence mechanism. I absolutely hated every single minute of school. I sort of winged me, other than my drama, because I loved my drama lessons and my natural ability was enough to get me through every assessment. Other than my drama, I practically winged those GCSEs and still came out living in a hostel in the middle of Manchester, working as a child street prostitute and smoking crack cocaine. I still managed to go out with GCSEs. I find it quite
I
bizarre,
mean,
to be honest. But
it is
yeah,
bizarre,
but
isn't it?
yeah,
It's
that's
phenomenal,
the
is what it
story.
is.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when you look at that, then so this nighttime life, I'm going to call it, because it is like day and night. That's how you lived, isn't it? And this sort of darker side of things. Who were the characters here, Amy? Were there grown up characters in this? Because clearly your clients as a street prostitute, I'm assuming, were grown men. Is that
yeah.
fair to assume? Is that
And
right?
and
So
clearly the men that wanted to find young underage girls on the streets. Yeah. See, I
yeah,
at the time I
it was
wouldn't have seen
apparent to
any of
them.
that. Looking back, I was still on those streets with 11 and 12-year-olds, and they were the first to be picked up. Yeah, certain questions, doesn't it? But you just do. I was just part of this gang of girls that just. I mean, some of them were digging heroin in the hands. So I felt like I was doing all right. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah. In
Um,
comparison, yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was what 14, 15 at this point, and some of these girls, I remember the names clear as day. They were child absconders from children's homes and secure units, and they were off digging as much heroin as they could before they got picked up by ICE.
Your motivation for the child prostitution, was that purely to pay for the drugs, or was there something
Do you
else
know?
there? Do you
Just
think?
fell into that. I didn't even know what I was doing. One day, I was in Manchester Piccadilly Gardens, and I remember being with this girl that I got quite close to. And she went, "Come in Wally Range." I was like, "Yeah, come on." Thought we were just going Wally Range. Next minute, I'm stood on a street corner, and she's saying, "You've not done it before. This is what you do." And we wouldn't do anything too far extreme. We'd do something that was really quick. Obviously, I don't know who's going to see this, so I won't go into
Yeah,
too much intimate detail. Do something that was
I think
really
we can
quick
read
and
between the
really
lines.
easy.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can read between the lines to make a really quick bit of money. And then before I knew it, it was this is why we do this. We go off now to this place and we go and score this little white marble thing and we stick it on this pipe and we smoke it. And it was like, oh, okay, that's what we do then. Just became part of the norm. But then whilst so I passed on my GCSEs whilst living in this hostel, and then I'd signed up for college. So I was sort of trying to separate myself away from this Piccadilly Gardens crew of people. And I remember my social worker having to come to the hostel every week to give me my allowance because I had no benefits. I wasn't able to claim benefits. So I then signed up for college. I left school. I got in this hostel. I left school before I should have done because I turned 16 in the March. So I was able to leave school before sitting my GCSEs. So I left school, was able to be in a hostel, sit my GCSEs, and then by the September I'd signed up for college. But I can remember going to but then I'd formed this little bit of a crack habit that I didn't even realise had formed. So I remember going to college, starting my BTEC National Diploma in Performing Arts, which was my absolute desire to become an actress. Um, Going to college, spending the day in college, coming out of college, which was in Cheetham Hill. Now, I don't know what you know about Manchester, but there's three main prostitute beats. There's Manchester City Centre, there's Wally Range, and there's Cheetham Hill. I'd come out of college, I'd walk down the road and pick up a punter, make 20 quid, go and score a crack, go back to the hostel and smoke it. It's like telling some kind of bizarre story, like it's not my life when I say this. Do you know what I mean?
and as
But
much as I'm sat here thinking, like, there's a bit of me going, like, wow, this is such an incredible story, but I, and it's hard because, like you just said, the way you tell the story is almost like you're describing someone else doing it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
there must have been even then that it can't have felt good. Is what I'm
It can't have
assuming.
felt good, but I can't attach any feelings to the way I tell the
No,
story.
do you
It's
not
just what
remember
it is.
though? Before you picked up a punter, as you described, what were the feelings then? Was there an anxiety about it, or was even that just very matter of fact, something I just
Matter of
have to
fact,
do? Yeah,
this is just
there
something
was
I do
no,
now.
there's no
I get a
panic or
free lift.
worry.
Yeah, and I get a free lift home to alongside. So
Yeah,
it's
just made
it just
sense.
made sense. Get to Cheetham Hill, go to college all day, pick up a punter in Cheetham Hill, get him to drop me off alongside after we've done business, go and score crack. So what's it? It just
Yeah,
made sense.
it's just logical, just a logical process.
It made sense.
I'm hoping it doesn't become a logical process for too many people, but
Yeah,
I can
it won't
100%.
repeat this behaviour. It's not recommended because it certainly was progressive. It certainly was
Yeah,
progressive, and we'll get onto that. So then I started my college course. I got my first flat in Longside. and I then got a flat in Crumpsall right next to college, so I didn't need to lift home to Longsight anymore. And I got pregnant with my first child, so the lifestyle stopped completely, and I was focused on my college course and being pregnant.
Can't have been
Literally,
you just stopped what you stopped using, or did that continue?
somebody left. This is how vulnerable I must have been at the time, because looking back now, this is just bonkers. Some big time Manchester cheetah mill gangster man left the most ridiculous parcel of crack cocaine in my flat for me to mind. And whilst he left it, it was that big, a tiny amount chipped off it would not have been noticeable in the slightest, because that's how big it was. And I probably smoked the most amount of crack cocaine I have ever smoked in my life on that night. And then I didn't feel too well for a few days, understandably. And this really saddens me to say, but I can't change it. A turning point for me at this point was I wasn't well, I went to the doctors, I was pregnant. So sadly, I'd smoked this huge amount of crack cocaine and I'd been pregnant. So a massive turning point was, wow, I'm pregnant. You know, I can't do this again. And at that point in my life, that was it. I never, for a long, long time, picked up another drug. I focused totally on going to college, having my daughter, going to higher education, having my second daughter, graduating 6 months pregnant with my second daughter from my higher ed, and just totally focused on the girls.
What
And
sort of time frame is this, Amy? Is this so
so
the period? How long were you clean? Let's say in that.
yeah, so I started college at 16. I got pregnant at 17. I had my first daughter at 18. I got pregnant again at 19. I had my second child at 21. So in that whole period of time, I had two pregnancies, completed further education and higher education, and moved from North Manchester back to South Manchester and settled in the South Manchester area. So just
That's big
complete focus,
transformation.
just
Yeah,
absolute complete focus on, I'm a mum, I've got two children, and I want an education, and I want a career, and I want to look after my kids.
and at that point, then that's a large period of time. You've probably then been clean for as long as you were using at that point in your life.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
because
or
yeah,
even
because
longer, or even longer.
yeah, because I mean, we're talking sort of 14 to 16 of mad crazy. It felt like years, felt like absolute years of chaotic behaviour. And it was sporadic as well. You know, sometimes I don't know how much out that 2 years I was off doing mad things around the streets. But definitely once I was in the hostel, I was engaging in that kind of behaviour all the time. And before I got pregnant with my eldest daughter, that was my life, literally going to college. But it was like a day and night, like you say. It was literally a day and night. But as soon as I got pregnant, that was then sort of from 17 to 21, two pregnancies and five, you know, that whole period of time was solid commitment to education until I graduated at 21.
Then, because I know that unfortunately it doesn't stay there, and you don't then stay off drugs and drink for the rest of your
Mm.
life. At what point did that start to creep back in again?
Right, okay, so this is where the story gets a little bit more crazy. Um,
More crazy?
yeah, just a bit, yeah.
Okay.
So I graduated with community arts. I was a community arts facilitator specialising in youth facilitation. So my role was to work in the community using drama as a medium to help people look at the self-esteem, the confidence, the assertiveness, challenge perceptions, behaviours. It was beautiful, and I set myself up as a freelance community artist. So my first job after graduating was freelance, and I did loads of fabulous work. I worked in prisons and children's homes and hospitals and homes for the elderly, and anything where I could use drama as a medium to support people's understanding on life, and did really, really well.
It's an amazing role.
Loved
Yeah.
it. Absolutely loved it. But it wasn't sustainable. I had 2 kids, and my own business wasn't sustainable. And funnily enough, we'll get to something that I'm working on now. But my business was called A. That's all my business was called, and we'll get to that. Yeah. So I went into my first main job role at about 22, and I became a Northwest Regional Development Worker for a national company. And I worked with children and young people that were in and leaving care, supporting them to have a voice in the care system. So I would run the Northwest Regional Forum of Young People, and we would go to Parliament once a month for the All Parliamentary Young Persons Group, and they'd have
Wow.
what I thought was a say in the system. I mean, there's big things that were changed through the company that I worked for. You may know about what was called the bin bag culture. So we campaigned as a company. The company was called A National Voice. It was run by the National Leave and Care Advisory Service, which was First Key at the time, and it was an umbrella project called A National Voice. And it was National Voice that changed the bill that no child should ever leave a placement with a bin bag. And it was
Oh,
actually
I do know about this. Yeah.
you'll find it in
Wow. Okay.
you'll
Yeah.
find it in the Children's Act. So it's the bin bag culture, and you'll find it in the Children's Act that no child should ever leave a placement, or is not allowed to leave a placement with a bin bag. Every child has to be given a hold all, and that's something that was campaigned for by the organisation that I worked for. So it was massive. So my
Fantastic.
group of young people were the Northwest Regional Forum, and there was the South East. So, we came together once a month. It was a great job. Sadly, it wasn't managed very well. I'm quite happy to say that. I don't care who sees it. It was managed
It's
poorly, and
often the
I'm not
case.
good. I'm not good with authority. So I lasted a couple of years and struggled with the management. And I went on to work locally in the area that I lived in South Manchester as a young person's housing support worker, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And then went on to a more generic role in housing support, and worked in housing support, but was made redundant. Reason being, a bit of a bugbear of mine. And there's a reason why I'm telling you this story, because we're going to lead back onto drugs and things like that. I'd stepped into somebody else's role because they were off on a secondment. So I'd found this role as a generic tenancy support worker in Manchester, which I absolutely love, because one previous to that was housing support for young people, housing them in their first homes and setting them up. This was generic, so I was looking at all sorts of different issues. But I stepped into somebody else's role as they went off on secondment, and the funding for their secondment ceased because of their own issues, but they were able to step back into their initial role, and therefore I was made redundant. Bit of a bugbear of mine. So I was completely out of the blue, out of work. Now, at this point, I'd managed to build a fabulous life for me and the girls. So when I got my very first job, I'm all or nothing. Everything's happening, and it's happening now. So I was living in a housing association property in South Manchester. And as soon as I got my first secure job, I was buying a house straight away. So I'd secured a plot on a new build land, and I was buying a house. And by the time I was in the role that I've just described, where I was made redundant, I was in my second bought home, and my first one was being let out. So I was really financially secure. However, it was 2008, and I don't know if you recall what happened in 2008. We were hit by the recession.
Huge crisis. Yeah.
So I'd built this foundation for me and my girls. It was absolutely fabulous, and I'd built it through bloody hard work. I'd graduated, I'd run my own business, I'd had 3 really secure, good paying roles in society, and worked really, really hard. I bought 2 houses, and then I was redundant and hit by the recession in the same year, and panic set
Huge,
in.
huge hit. Yeah.
So I started looking for work. I couldn't find what I wanted. I couldn't find anything that would meet my financial needs. And I'd had a tiny, tiny toe dip just after, in between my self-employment and my first job. So my self-employment, it wasn't financially stable enough for me and my two girls. So I don't know how it happened, but someone said, "Why don't you just do a bit of escorting? You know, just a little bit of that." So to me, second to none. I don't, it means nothing to me. Yeah. Oh
You've
yeah,
done worse.
I'm
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
driving.
You've
Yeah,
done
yeah, I'll
harder.
have a go at that. Yeah. So a tiny little toe dipping in my early 20s, made a couple of quid to see myself through, then got my first job. So by the time I'm sort of 27, I've got these two houses, I'm hit by the recession, I've been made redundant, mortgages are flying out the roof on both properties. Oh, do you know what? I'd lost loads of weight and had a boob job, I was looking great. Escorting, sorted. Do you know what I mean? And before you knew it, I was working for a really, really top class escort agency and making an absolute bloody fortune and living the life. But what comes with the high life escorting life is high life cocaine. And unfortunately, I'd never sniffed cocaine in my life. I'd smoked crack, but I'd not sniffed cocaine.
Never done that. Okay.
No,
That's
I've
not normally the
never
other
been
way around, isn't it?
interested in cocaine. Never, ever been interested in cocaine. I went straight to the crack pipe as a teenager. Never been interested in cocaine. So I'm thinking I'm getting my life sorted by making this money, but then slowly but surely hang on a minute, this is coming hand in hand, this party jobs and sniffing cocaine. Before you knew it, I was making a fortune. I was taking the kids to Australia, to Dubai, to Florida. We were living the absolute high life, but my life was deteriorating mentally because I'd introduced a new substance to my life.
Just to reflect on that a second again, I look at this going, from this life of absolute chaos, you still manage to get your GCSEs. Then you go into, you're in even more chaos. You qualify even further. You end up setting up a life that most people, let's say, who've had a really good start to life, people who've been brought up in a perfect childhood, great loving, supportive family around them, most of people like that would really struggle to get themselves in a position that
Mm.
you got yourself into. There's this constant undertone, isn't there, of a remarkable success in spite of all the odds.
It's a
There's
double life,
obviously,
isn't it? Yeah,
but there's also a huge resilience to you, isn't there? Because to be able to do that, you're constantly being pressed down by life, and then have just found a way. It became too much, and that's then you go back to saying, well, maybe someone with more support in the early years wouldn't have unravelled at those points, but you did because it became too much. But
mm,
then you find another way, and you find another way, and you've always managed to go through these real periods of chaos, but have that resilience within you to find a way to not just survive, but actually flourish in those
yeah,
conditions.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
that. Yeah,
there were
yeah,
downsides to it, but I just thought that
yeah,
it was really noticeable to me in the story so far, is that that's been a constant theme. But
yeah.
here we are again. You found yourself now with this darker side of life drawing you back in,
Yeah, I'm
and you're
about
now taking
29.
cocaine.
Yeah, I'm about 29, which is just a year older than my daughter now. And I had this huge roller coaster of life. I've got two young girls, and yeah, life is still yet to take a deeper, darker turn.